Yes, the troll face meme that might have died a couple weeks ago. Glad you asked. Welcome to Crit. Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Christened Music Podcast, where if it's listenable, it's christenable. I'm your host, Chris Martins. Today, we are going to take a look at the Tally Hall album, Marvin's Marvelous Mechanical Museum. This is the 2005 debut album from Ann Arbor indie wonky rock band, Tally Hall, a band whose whimsy and weirdness was apparent from the second that I heard them. I was introduced to Tally Hall, as many youngins like myself are introduced to music in the internet age, through memes. The closer, Ruler of Everything, was the hot new meme for a good couple of weeks, and it was just weird enough to pique my interest. I'm listening to the song and I'm thinking, what is this? Not only did I finally not miss the boat on the hot new internet music fad, but I stumbled on something good here. I have to check out the rest of this album. They gave me Da Vinci's Notebook vibes, which is always a good thing, but since it's Tally Hall, it's way weirder. And now that I've listened to this album the whole way through, I can say it's pretty good. The production's a little inconsistent, but everyone sounds alright. The composition is not far off from the alternative scene of the 2000s, with Panic at the Disco dropping their debut in the same year, for example, but it has enough character to stand out from that crowd. I was expecting something high concept from that Ruler of Everything song, given how much of a strange yet vivid story it told. But this isn't really that. I was kind of bummed out by this at first, but the lack of concept is by design. There's a certain joie de vivre about this record that I really gravitate towards. Sure, Tally Hall seems to wear their influences on their sleeves often on this album, but they still manage to make a fun record with a deeper meaning to find if you look hard enough. In short, not bad for a band that I found through a silly internet meme. The production's pretty good, but a few things here. The mixing is fairly standard rock fare, complete with the unfortunate rock trope that has persisted throughout the ages. Heavy electric guitars that overpower the vocals. These electric guitar explosions on the opener, Good Day, perfectly illustrate my point. But don't get turned off by the first couple tracks that make a few mixing mistakes, because mixing does get better. Hell, even Two Wov's electric guitars are better than the opener. Once the fog clears, you get some pretty clear sounding vocals. Harmonies are okay from a mixing standpoint, but I feel like slightly too much emphasis is placed on the lead melody at points. But when this album's vocals are balanced, these guys are really amazing together. The bass on Two Wov is the best handled on the record. It's nice and just, it's nice and beefy, you know? I feel like slightly too much emphasis is placed on the lead melody at points, but when this album's vocals are balanced, these guys are amazing together, like in the first few seconds of that opener, Good Day. Also, the hidden track, Hidden in the Sand, has a very nice bassy sound to the vocals. That is a nice way to end things off. I wish the rest of that album had that full sound, but it still sounds good. The panning and other effects on this thing can get really creative at points. It always adds some more definition to this record, and therefore adds more fun. With vocals, it adds more layering, which makes the vocals sound fuller. This translates to the instruments too. Instruments are placed around the album in such a way that makes it feel that much more immersive. That clacking in the right ear at the end of Welcome to Tally Hall is really interesting, and it leads very well into Taken for a Ride, but I'm getting ahead of myself. There are parts of this record such as Haiku, which feels like you're in the middle of a crowded bar where this band is playing, which is so immersive and gives these guys a more fun, laid-back college band vibe, which, yes. There are various filters around the album which give this album a bit more diversity. The digital filters on Taken for a Ride are great. The hidden track has a dusty quality to it, as if it were just picked up from the shore of a beach somewhere. But this effects part is the first of many parts of this review where I'm going to geek out over Ruler of Everything. This is where they pull out all the stops when it comes to effects, in my opinion. I said this record production gets better as it goes along, and this is the result of that upward trend. The vocal effects and panning and backwards warped speech throughout the song is so good. This is a really, really interesting record when it comes to production, and it only gets better when you talk about... Composition is really something. It's quirky and weird, but nothing too crazy as far as the music's concerned. But for a debut, it can get fairly dense and involved as far as instruments are concerned. Drums are nice and punchy throughout the record, at least when they are analog. There's this filter in Taken for a Ride which makes the drums sound a little more synthetic, but nonetheless punchy. The various hand drums to add that island sound on Banana Man really sells the Caribbean vibe, which we'll get to in a moment. Don't you worry. Pianos are nice and clear and always pretty, whether they are melodic or in the pocket. They are commanding as well as noodly on the opener, Good Day. Guitars aren't really anything special, but they get the job done. Acoustic guitars set the tone of Be Born quite well. Same goes for the electric guitars on To Love, which really remind me of Blink-182 and a bit of Mother Mother for the Canadians in the audience, which is, let's face it, most of you. Speaking of To Love and Mother Mother, the bass has this groovy vibe and it really works for a lot of the record. Tally Hall gives their bassist a role on this album and he just runs with it with those really groovy lines. They are often helping out guitars, but they are given a role beyond that. You can really hear that on To Love with that sick solo bass line. There are brass sections early on that add that college band vibe that I have been pretty warm towards, mainly because they remind me of Cake, a band that I grew up with. There's also that New Orleans marching band style brass on The Whole World and You, which is pretty cool. There are strings on this record that range from deep and pretty to fiddles and fun, such as 13, which does the former, and Be Born, which does the latter. As you can attest, there is a lot to talk about when it comes to instruments on this record. Structure's a bit of a mixed bag for me. On one taken, I want to slam this album because structure kind of goes by the wayside right from the beginning. However, this is just Good Day, and that's the opener and the weirdest track from a structure standpoint, as it darts around musical ideas quite haphazardly. It starts to make more sense as it goes along with more conventional song structures that are expected of the 2000s era alternative pop rock band, but made a little weirder to fit their style. As eccentric as this album is, it manages to get pretty cohesive thanks to very solid transitions. These transitions are employed right away between the opener and Greener, then Welcome to Tally Hall and Taken for a Ride. This makes this album quite interesting, and it really goes the extra mile to add cohesion to a record that doesn't necessarily need any. This is an eclectic collection of songs type of record, and as such, it is an album that is weird and wonderful. It has nothing to prove anyone, and confidently struts its way into your ears with all its weirdness in tow. Lyrics are a quirky beast to tackle, but nonetheless enjoyable. These are sung by the boys of Tally Hall. The yellow tie guy, Robert Cantor, who would, by the way, go on to write that Shia LaBeouf song, has some breathy punk rock vocals on Greener that really bring out those Blink-182 vibes. Flanking him is the man in the red tie, Joe Hawley. Joe's responsible for the bulk of the vocals on this record, and rightly so. He pulls off a variety of vocal styles that fit the mood of each song very well. Part of the bonkers nature of this album is because of this guy. Whether good or bad, this guy sells it. He really does. Sometimes he gets so cheesy that he makes my eyes roll into the back of my skull. But again, he really sells the vibe. His rapping on Ruler of Everything is great too. He and Cantor are helped by the blue tie sporting Zubin Sedgi, I hope I pronounced that right, who makes for a 3-part harmony that is really, really beautiful whenever it shows up. Side note, whoever sang that "I stepped in gum" line gave me flashbacks to Nostalgia Critics' The Wall, and those are memories I do not like to revisit. Just stop. Ew, no, get it away from me now. The lyrics themselves are as quirky as the boys sing them as. There's no real concept in mind besides this have fun vibe, and I really like that. There are fairly standard rock themes like love on this record, standard romantic woes show up on Greener, Just Apathy, and Haiku, father-son love on Be Born, as well as the alt-rock stalker song To Wov. The song Welcome to Tally Hall is exactly what it sounds like, an introduction to the band. Ordinarily, I would hate the idea of songs like these in the first place for reasons of show, don't tell. I feel like artists have no need to formally introduce themselves in music, as their music is the introduction. But with a band as shameless, carefree, and fun as Tally Hall, it somehow works. There are more thematically interesting songs on this record, like The Bidding, which plays like an auction mixed with the dating game. You know, that game show with the girl choosing among 3 guys to date? Banana Man may be offensive in current year with its fake Jamaican accents and stuff, but don't count it out just yet. It's a really interesting song about maybe drugs or vacations or drugs on vacation and how modern life at a cubicle sucks. And then we get to Ruler of Everything. This is perhaps Tally Hall's masterpiece, and it's not very hard to see why. It is the most lyrically interesting song on this record, and it talks about time and how it governs our every move. Time controls our lives, and being insecure is not worth the time. We're all gonna run out of time eventually, so while you have it, make the most of it. Give it up and smile, as they say. This is a vibe that is crucial to how and why this album works. It is an album that is not concerned with serious matters, just with making the most fun, enjoyable music possible. So yeah, turns out well-made and well-placed memes led me down a rabbit hole of good music, which only gets more interesting the deeper you go. And the entrance to this rabbit hole is Tally Hall's Marvin's Marvelous Mechanical Museum. Like the museum the album is named after, it's bright and full of weird things to look at and enjoy, but it's just off the beaten path enough to catch you off guard, and it makes you feel like you've made a real find. Production is alright, if a bit cliche for my liking at first. It gets better as the album goes along. Panning is used to add more dimension to great effect, whether they want you to feel like you're in a crowded bar or in some psychedelic other world. This album's pool of instruments is on the larger and more diverse end of things, and it always works well from track to track. Structure is weird at first, but it starts to make slightly more sense as it goes along, as it is a weird album by design. It is an album unafraid to express itself, sink or swim. This confidence shines through in the lyrics too. These singers are fun, but not just that. They carry their song with their great voices as well. Joe Hawley in particular is vital to the young adult 2000s fun rock band vibe of this album, with singing and rapping in different tones of voice that always work, no matter how bizarre. The lyrics are as quirky and fun as everything else on this album. They are a diverse collection of songs that range from something like a Weezer to something completely out of left field. Ruler of Everything is the best song on this album by far, and it sums up not only this album, but the time it was in. It is a song about how time dictates our every move and how pointless it is to waste time on insecurity, which is a perfect way to sum up this album. It is not afraid to be what it is, and it's confident with itself. It sells itself, really. Its weirdness reminds me of the early internet age that this album was made in, and it's kind of poetic that this record came back into the laps and hearts of everyone on the internet. It's like the Bare Naked Ladies, but less popular, but more ambitious. These guys went from meme to meme from 2005 to now, and this is a great album to have on your resume when you're experiencing a spike in popularity. I'm giving this one a strong 7 out of 10. And now, a message from our sponsors. The Christened Music Podcast is brought to you in part by Denzel Smatter, host of the Denzel XI Podcast, the number one podcast in the country. Denzel has produced for Toronto rappers such as Houdini, J-Neat, and Roni, and in his upcoming podcast, he talks about his craft in music production as well as what's going on in the music industry. You can listen to the Denzel XI podcast on SoundCloud as well as YouTube if you search for Denzel XI. You can follow Denzel on Twitter and Instagram where he uploads this podcast as well as his beats. That is the Denzel XI Podcast, the number one podcast in the country, known from coast to coast like butter on toast. The Christened Music Podcast is also brought to you in part by The Hood Teacher and his podcast, The Evil Eyes of Toronto. The Hood Teacher is an upcoming rapper from Toronto who has been around the block. In his upcoming podcast, he talks about gang violence and politics in the streets of the Six. He is a vital voice in this city's time as gang violence rises. Classes will be in session on SoundCloud. Follow the professor on Instagram at Mr.9, the number 9, INE. Right there. Look for The Evil Eyes of Toronto. Or they'll be watching you. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this review of Tally Hall's Marvin's Marvelous Mechanical Museum. Thank you all so much for listening and watching. Let me know your thoughts on this record in the comments below. If you like hearing me talk music and do music, subscribe to the Martelins music channel and hit the bell so you never miss anything I put out. If you want to see more of me and my musical endeavors, you can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok at Martelins Music. If you want strictly review-related content, follow at Christened Music on Instagram. If you want all that in the kitchen sink, you can check out my website at martelinsmusic.wixsite.com/music. And before I leave you, I have music of my own that I am anxious to share with you, and it sounds just a little like...